Everybody breathe. Okay, and we are live. So if you have your other device, just turn it down, mute it, and then you can actually go in and share from my page. So you can go on my page to actually share it out. Hello, hello. As you come in, just please say hello so we know who's joining. Thank you for joining us. We will get started in a few moments. Just gonna allow the notification to go out. Peace, peace, Regina. Thank you for joining. As you come in, please say hello so we know who is joining. I'd like to acknowledge those who come into the space and contribute to this beautiful energy that we are going to be sharing this evening. Thanks for the likes. Give us some love, give us some hearts. That's all part of creating this beautiful atmosphere. Hello, Alicia. Thank you for joining. Okay, we're going to get started. So welcome, welcome. I am Phoenix Love of the Healer's Haven, Wellness Solutions, and the Community Cultivators Think Tank. I am actually going to allow, because most of our community cultivators unfortunately could not be with us this evening. So Verdell, if you just want to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Member of Community Cultivators. I am delighted to be here, Verdell Jones. And I'm really excited about this topic today. We are talking about working while Black in the midst of global crisis and civil unrest. And this is going to be a much needed, definitely conversation. Phoenix and I had a conversation a couple of days ago talking about this very issue. And so I'm just delighted to have all of you here this evening to chat it up about this.
Thank you, thank you. And Verdell is going to be our wonderful host this evening, but I just want to tell you a little bit about Community Cultivators, who we are. We are a collection of experts from different employment, occupation fields, community leaders that come together. We're like-minded, like-spirited thought leaders who have a heart for the people, a heart for the community, and making this world a better place. Like I know many of you out there are, want to do that, especially now, just the climate that we're in, right? So we really came together, put this think tank together because we knew it was an opportunity to explore different ideas, implement different initiatives, and champion behind different causes to assist others while providing a safe and nurturing and sustaining space for our leadership needs as well. So we focus in on 5 specific areas, but it's not limited to those areas. And that's health and wellness, social justice and awareness, economic empowerment and legacy building, education and enrichment, and media and technology. So tonight, like Verdell mentioned, this is such an important topic because we are in the midst of so many different things going on, but the global pandemic, we have a little bit of civil unrest going on, racial injustice, police brutality. So this is the time to really talk about how is that going to impact us, not only just in our personal lives, but when we talk about our work life as well, right? Because everything we have to do work-life balance. That's just a part of living. That's a part of showing up every day, right? So now we have this opening up, and I'm doing the air quotes, the economy, whatever that means, but many of us are going back into the workplace environments. Some of us may be making a shift or a transition into saying, you know what, maybe it's time to do my own thing. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to have a conversation. We have an amazing wealth of leaders, thought leaders from different employment sectors, and they're going to share their experiences, some knowledge, and some wisdom. So I am going to turn it over to Verdell, and she is going to lead in introducing our guests for this evening. Thank you all for joining.
Okay, thank you, Phoenix, so much. Let's get to it. We have so much to cover, area to cover. So I want to get right into it, and we're going to start with the introductions. So if I can have Dr. Lisa Newland, please just introduce yourself and tell everybody watching a little bit about you.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Let me first thank you, Phoenix, and your Community Cultivators think tank for having these series of discussions that really speak to the needs of our community on so many different levels. I'm currently the chairperson of the social work department at Malloy College. I've been there since 2005. I hold the rank of professor, and I'm completing a 2-year term as faculty president. So I certainly operate in the space of higher education, faculty leadership, social work, social justice, and things of the like. I'm also the president of the Nassau Suffolk Association of Black Social Workers here on Long Island. So I'm glad for the opportunity to be part of this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for being here to contribute to the conversation. Next, we're going to introduce Andrea Deloney. If you can just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your diversity and inclusion strategist. So please share.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And I echo Sister Lisa. Thank you all so much for inviting me to participate this evening. Again, my name is Andrea Deloney, and I work as a project manager in diversity and inclusion at Northwell Health. I've been with Northwell for about 5 years now. Professional background is really focused in human resources, specifically talent acquisition. So a lot of the D&I work that I do primarily focuses around workforce diversity, inclusion, and equity initiatives in the organization. Outside of work, I am heavily involved in the community, a proud member of I Make This Incorporated, Board of Trustees at my church, and I support a number of organizations that are doing tremendous work across both Massachusetts and Suffolk County. Excited to be a part of the conversation this evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it. And then next up, we have Dave Hines. Dave, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do? And, and I'm excited to hear your contribution to this conversation as well.
Yes, most certainly. First of all, it's a privilege to be part of this community cultivators think tank. It's a great honor. There's just so much to share, so much going on. I work as a cybersecurity architect and software developer. So basically, it deals with numbers and letters in a nutshell. I work with a lot of networks here, like network engineering, setting up servers, setting up routers, making sure that companies can communicate externally. I also set up IDUs, which is intrusion defense systems. In other words, these are all things to secure a network to prevent cybersecurity. And then on the other side to that, I work with certain companies in developing and consulting their coding. So I develop quite a few softwares and applications so that they can have, maximum functionality. Um, Today, with this whole COVID situation, telenet seems to be the way to go. So lately, I've been doing a lot of telenet developing for a lot of the doctors and practitioners. So it somewhat works as a bulletproof job, so to speak. But once again, I'm just happy to be here and look forward to the amazing conversations.
Yes, thank you, thank you. And last but not least, we have Peggy Bean. Thank you so much for joining us, and tell us a little bit about what you do, and we're excited to have you as well to this conversation.
Oh, great. Well, I come with about 30 years of media experience, worked primarily with Black media, but for the past 8 years, I'm now a senior account executive at Working Mother Media, where I help Fortune 1000 companies develop D&I strategies with their own respective organizations, as well as nurture and promote the advancement for women at Fortune 1000 companies.
Okay.
So thank you for inviting me.
Yes, thank you for being here. As you can see, we have some really, really outstanding representation of Black excellence with us tonight. And I, again, want to thank you so much for being a part of this much needed conversation. One of the topic is being Black while working in this crisis, not only the pandemic, but all of these social injustice that has been going on. And I just want to open up the conversation with just sharing a little bit about where I work and where I come from as far as that's concerned, and being in a space where I'm the only, and when I say only, I literally mean only, Black person working within a school district of hundreds of people. The faculty, we do have a few, a few Black people that are in technology space, maybe in transportation, but that's far and few between. One of the questions when I was first hired 15 years ago was, how would you feel about being the only Black person working in the district? That was an interview question. So my response basically was, being on Long Island, and this is where I have been all my life. I come across that often. But I just want to throw it out to the panel, and being in the spaces that you're in, and sometimes being the only person or Black person in a particular industry, how do you kind of walk through your jobs, your work in that way, if you've had that experience?
Yeah, if I may, I would say that it is extremely exhausting. I think, when you also have, and I know Peggy can relate, when you have that diversity and inclusion attached to your brand or, to your title, there's a heightened sense of expectation. And then you combine that with being a Black woman or a Black male in that space. You have your colleagues and your peers that are looking at you, waiting for the next move to see what initiative, what program, what statement comes out on behalf of the organization. You have your family and your friends, your immediate tribe, who know your passion and are waiting to see how you hold your employer or your organization accountable. And then you're battling your own emotions on how you're processing all of the chaos that's happening around you. So I think for me, it definitely, it's a roller coaster. Some days I wake up and it's like, well, because I'm the Black woman of the department, why do I have to solve for this issue? But then on the flip side, being, a woman of God, I acknowledge that He has me in this place at this time for, His reason. And I would do a disservice to not be vocal and to not be a part of those conversations and waste the opportunity to have an influence over, what my organization does or how I show up to those conversations.
Right. And do you find, I would like somebody else to, to add to that, but just to kind of piggyback on that, do you find you meet with opposition? You have the title of, diversity and inclusion, but do you find opposition with the work that you're doing within your organization? Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes, if you don't mind, I'd like to just mention a few things. Sometimes I do feel like it can happen. Um, Being in the tech world, and especially with what I do, it's so uncomfortable sometimes when you walk in, and like yourself, I can relate to it. You're always that exception, that one person that can be easily picked out. So it, at times you always got to prove yourself. You always got to be the best of what you are. Sometimes when they're meeting with the board of directors, they may not always listen. They may prefer to listen to someone with a lesser position than me. However, they still come back to the same solution as what I provide. So at times it could be a challenge, but what it has taught me is to always, education and preparation. There's no way you can refute that. It's always going to be something that's going to help your caliber, help you to do better, and be able to face challenges with resilience. It's so critical what these challenges does for us. But yeah, it could be a challenge, but I believe just being optimistic, being positive, that too could become contagious.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. I mean, I'm now on the other side of the desk. I talk to and help people like Andrea, and I'm often finding that that diversity person is usually the only one on their entire team who needs to not only, make sure that diversity is heard, but that diversity is integrated and not an extra thing to think about. I think with the latest incidents that have happened, with George Floyd, yeah, now it's in the forefront. So thankfully, my clients are thrilled, but I am incredibly busy now helping them with the verbiage, helping them train senior leadership, taking them through the importance of unconscious bias training, not only at the tap, but through the masses. I've been on several very emotionally draining calls where I've had my clients cry because of the weight of having to really help their people, feel like they're important, they're being heard. And that's the most important thing that's happening now. I have been in situations where I have been the only one. I know how that feels. I too was asked that question when I tried to get into advertising. What would you do as a Black woman? And I'm like, I'll give you a different point of view. But it's almost bittersweet what's going on now with us, because now people are wanting to hear from us. I've heard from my president, my direct report asking me, how am I doing? And I am going to take full advantage of that. Because I've been quiet too long. So we no longer have to be quiet. I even questioned the editor of my magazine. I said, do not refer to my people in a lowercase b. Do not. We are an identifier. We are Black and or African American.
That's right. That's right.
And
that's
so
right.
she told me, oh, well, that was AP style. I said, well, we need to challenge that.
Right. That's right.
And I shared with her, I said, I was on the Honor Society for Journalism. I said, so as a Sigma Delta Chi member, I will help you challenge that, but we need to change direction. So
that's right.
It's like full circle my entire career. And so I feel for you, Andrea. I will help you, girl. I have resources I'll share with you.
Right.
Because we're doing webinars on how to handle just that with the work you have to do.
Thank you, sis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just, certainly add to the conversation. I understand the exhausting nature of it. And can I say that the exhausting nature of the last 2 weeks is a different type of exhaustion? particularly because where I work, we don't have a diversity and inclusion officer. We don't have an initiative specifically named for that as an institution of higher learning. We do have siloed groups that are working on some of these initiatives. We have a center related to social justice that we're forming and giving identity to. So being one of few Black faculty specifically, but also being in leadership college-wide, I'm often only at the table in some meetings, and I'm one of few in the college community. So there definitely is, the reality of, I think it was noted in the Facebook post presenting this forum tonight, mask off. So I'm very conscious of mask and code switching, and the times where, okay, which version of Lisa has to show up, and the realities of that, but also understanding the comfort that I can be in my truth and where I can be in my truth more comfortably, and trying to create more spaces like that in the workplace.
Okay, so I want to make a comment just to add on to a few things that were said. But what I'm noticing, there's a little bit of feedback. So if everybody can go on mute while, unless you're speaking of course. I don't want anybody to miss, because this is some good stuff. So, what I do want to say, because it's going to lead to a question, because Lisa brought up something very important that I know many of us, Black Americans or Blacks, that have to deal with it in our respective workplace, which is code switching, which is how do I wear my hair, women and men. All of these things have been factors when it comes to the workplace, right? But I just could remember when I was working in corporate America, and I was working for a company in advertising where I actually know Miss Peggy Bean from, where we actually met many moons ago. And I was working for a company that, pretty much I was one of maybe 2 or 3 Black people out of 100 and something advertising agency. And I always was looked to be the authority on everything, okay, on everything Black. So it would be some of those questions, or do you get up, if I had braids or, extensions or, added braids in my hair, do you do that every morning? And can I touch your hair? And those type of things of, just stuff you're like, okay, why do I even have to deal with that when I come to work? I come to work to contribute my skills, my knowledge. This is why you hired me, not for me to be the authority on everything Black. So I'm bringing all that up because these are all of what seems to be the small things that when you're dealing with a situation like now, like a crisis, and situations that seem, very much out of our control, that we have to now add on and it exasperates the things that we are normally dealing with, and everything is being brought to the forefront, which is part of it. Like Peggy said, it's a good thing because now the conversations are happening, right? It presents the opportunity for us to have these real conversations. But sometimes when you are the one of few or the only one, it puts like you have to represent the whole Black community, like everywhere. And we are not homogeneous. We're not all the same. We're different people, right? But that is not always understood. So to go back to the question about code switching, I would love to know, like Lisa mentioned, is that something that any of you, had to experience, and what has been your experience with that? And in what context has that been an issue for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say even, working in this virtual space now where majority of the shared services and corporate teams are at home, code switching is still very much a majority part of my day, and on a number of levels, right? So one, being a Black woman, to oftentimes being one of the younger voices that are at the table having conversations. So having to constantly, you know, manage the perception of what would be appeasing to my generation, to the, you know, Gen Zers behind me, and also aligning that to some of the more tenure generations that I'm having conversations with. And it's tough. I mean, I think, you know, on one end of it, it really just kind of, you know, shows my ability to be versatile in the conversations that I'm having. So, you know, hats off to me when it's necessary. But I think too, it's unfortunate because, you know, as organizations have continued to define what diversity means for them, to define what it means to have an inclusive culture, you know, you would think that we would be moving down a path where we can eliminate some of that energy that goes into code switching. But I think as these conversations continue to evolve, you kind of find yourself having to do it more and more. And I'm even seeing it too as I work with leaders that are a little bit higher up within the organization, and just understanding, you know, my role in the conversation, how I articulate my perspectives or how I contribute to the dialogue. So it's unfortunate. I mean, again, just kind of shifting perspective, I try to take it as, you know, I can keep up with that, or they keep up with me. You know, sometimes them pitching things and not being ready for my response, and being able to quickly, you know, jab something back, and they're all kind of like, oh, we didn't think of that. And I'm like, I know, that's why I'm waiting for you to respond now. So I think it's, you know, it's a lot, but you know, we navigate it as best as we can.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else want to respond?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I mean, I think code switching is part of what we have to do in corporate America. I switch based on whoever's across the desk from me, because we are not homogeneous. You know, there might be a person of color that's on the other side that is not going to give me the homegirl feel. So I have to keep it corporate, you know, because I know that she probably has a high authority, so she has to walk a fine line. So I deal with her that way. When I deal, you know, with someone, you know, of another color, that's a natural switch automatically. We have to do that. I mean, we call it masking. You know, in my office, thankfully I've had the benefit of working in an office where they do accept me, though I do get questions about my hair, you know, because some days I add some hair and some days I don't, some days I color it. So, you know, they get all like, oh my God, but I've given them, how shall I put it? I put up enough of a shield that they know don't go too far. Like, I've seen someone, you know, in that thinking motion about, can I touch your hair? But they know, like, don't do that. But it has affected my trajectory career-wise, because I, you know, that fine line of being categorized as an angry Black woman, you understand? And you know, there was a time where when my mom was ill and I couldn't stay at work, and I forgot to keep my shield up, and I allowed them to let me see myself upset. And certainly it got translated into something else, you know, not having executive presence, gravitas, etc. when I've showed my emotional side. So it's a chess game that we all have to play. We all also have to shoulder that being the authority on Black. Peggy, what do you think about this? You know. I take that role because that is a role that we all have to carry, whether we like it or not. So we have to represent and speak for our people. And like I said, this is a time to be a little more braver with your conversations, to kind of say, well, this is how you look at things. So, you know, it's going to always happen. I don't think this time is going to change. I think we might be able to say a little bit more now that, you know, with the movement going, you know, we have to take this opportunity to speak up for those who won't speak up, who won't be able to speak up for themselves.
Yes, giving voice to the voiceless. Absolutely.
We have to. We have to take that title. We got to carry it for the people, for the culture.
Yes,
For the culture, agreed.
For my daughter, your son, we
That's
have
right.
to. We have to make it easier for them. So we have to. That's our job.
Yes. Yes.
And I think to that point, we also have to, you know, teach them and have those teachable moments with them specifically about things like code switching. I take it on as a bilingual capacity that I have developed over the course of my career, right? And so really being able to speak that and help them understand that, and not just our children, but the youth behind us, the next generation, that's so critical. So yeah, agreed.
We have graduated from Pig Latin. Does anybody remember that? Even in this climate, you know, where we are giving voice, we are able to have these conversations, you know, mask off, which is the theme of this overall telesummit, right? Hear us, see us, believe us, right? Because it is always have to been in the past that we sort of had to always prove ourselves, right? Work a little bit harder, you know, put in more time, just a lot more than our white counterparts. So to some degree, it is necessary. It's like, do we need our own language still? Because you talked about, right? Verbiage, language is going to be very important, because last night when we was having the conversation with the young people, we spoke about, you know, who controls the narrative and what is that narrative, what's being put out there. So I think that definitely applies when we're in the workplace, right? Because there are those conversations that we need to have amongst ourselves too. And what does that look like? And with our children and with the younger people, like Peggy is saying, Andrea, you know, we can connect. I can give you some information, language. You know, this is going to be important going forward.
I mean, I would love to be able, my goal is when I make enough money, or even now, I want to be able to take kids coming out of college who are about to enter into the job market, who has maybe decided that they want to pursue a career in corporate America, and just kind of give them a tool book or something, prepare them. Because when I started, I made so many mistakes, left so many jobs, because I said or did the wrong thing. That wasn't wrong in nature, but it was wrong in that environment. Our kids are a lot more outspoken, very much so. And do we teach them how to kind of toe it in, or because they're very vocal, what do we do? And that's my question. And that's why I want to be involved with the youth, because, you know, they're going to enter the job market, and they need to know what to look for and how to navigate it. Mask on, mask off. I feel like
Right.
they need to know, because they haven't traveled the same path we have.
Right.
And I would just add to that, for sure, outspoken with expectation of acceptance. And then when they get that hard hit, you know, that may not be the acceptance that they are anticipating, and then need to be, you know, built back up from that. So I definitely hear you on that damage control, that you want to be able to offer. That's really important.
You know, I just like to jump in. It's you guys made such valid points. I think in my case as a young Black man, it comes with so many different challenges. But what I've learned over the years is, you know, like we mentioned earlier, trying to be the best at what you do. It's not supposed to be, because our Caucasian counterparts, they have like a free ride, so to speak. Whereas in my case, I got to be the best at what I'm doing. Interestingly, I think a lot has to do with the way, you know, we raise our kids, whether it's our children, nieces, nephews. I think it has to start from very, very early. I have a 16-month-year-old, and I'm teaching her this site called ABC Mouse, and it's phenomenal. It's the most amazing thing I've ever seen for toddlers, kids from the ages of 18 months to like 4 years old. And lately she's been showing me how to scroll the iPad, how to move the fingers around, and I'm like, wow, this is just amazing. But what I'm trying to get at is that we need to teach our children the importance of having jobs that are bulletproof jobs, so to speak. For example, in my case, being in tech, I don't really feel the stress of unemployment as much. And if I'm not at the site or where I'm supposed to be consulting, they can't really fire me because they need me. So instilling in our kids, our young people, our teenagers, hey, study something that you cannot be replaceable. They can't say, hey, you're going to be fired tomorrow or next week or whatever the case might be. If it happens, it's a very low probability that it can happen. But I think something to that effect, and to our young people, they lack resources. They just don't know where to look, especially our Black youths. They don't know where to look, where to find the necessary resources. And at some point, I'll just jump in and share some really, really practical, proactive resources that could be useful, you know. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that. And thank you guys for your thoughts also.
Yeah, so Dave, at the end, we're definitely, and just everybody that's watching on Facebook, just turn, okay. Everybody that's watching on Facebook, we will share resources at the end. All right. So, so Dave, yeah, you'll have an opportunity to share those resources. But I know Verdell has a few more questions for everyone.
Just in reference to that being, you know, the best that you can be. Just in my situation, I, you know, trying to be the best that I could be. And that's just in my nature. I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure everything is good. But what I found myself doing is, and it was kind of an aha moment for me when I was having a discussion about this, is I try so hard to the detriment of my own profession, my professional growth, because I'm putting all my, you know, eggs in one basket, so to speak, at being the best I can be at a job that doesn't appreciate or acknowledge what your efforts are, or somebody else gets that glory. So, you know, putting in all of that effort and that work when somebody else gets to shine and the work that you've done goes unnoticed, because I'm not going to brag about it. That's just not who I am. I just do the work. So what would you kind of say to someone who is in that situation where you know you're doing a good job, but there's no acknowledgement, there's no affirmation? And we all need a little affirmation.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the great things that I've been able to do at Northwell is kind of build out my tribe within such a large organization. You know, we have over 72,000 employees, and over the course of 5 years, I've had the pleasure of meeting some phenomenal sisters, some phenomenal brothers who we just have our own little power circle text message group chats where we can kind of celebrate each other's small wins, big wins, etc. But I think to your point about putting in so much work and not feeling like you're receiving the recognition or the acknowledgement of that, something that I've learned and my mentors have also encouraged me to do is always figure out who are really the real key players, you know, in whatever it is that you're doing. So, you know, whether it's your immediate boss, your boss's boss, or a leader from another, you know, department that you work with on a daily basis. And something that's really been able to work for me is as I'm thinking through my projects or ideas are flowing, I share what needs to be shared within the smaller sense of my team. And then when it comes to presenting out to the, you know, the big stakeholders, the big decision makers and influencers, that one little icing on top of that cake that I've been kind of mixing until it's time to pull that thing out the oven, that's when I go to lay it on so that it's a collective wow. And even, you know, whether it's my leadership or my colleagues, they're, you know, they're able to kind of look around and say, oh, shoot, you know, we didn't really even think of it that way. And I'm like, I know, I kind of held on to that. But it's, you know, it's discretion. So you figure out who you share what with, especially when you know that your idea, you know, your contribution is going to be a huge game changer.
That's great. Awesome. Definitely a good thing to keep in mind. Keep a little bit to yourself.
I don't know about that.
You don't know about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in a different field. I'm more on the, you know, revenue production side. So, but the days are gone where traditionally you put your nose down and you do the work and you get acknowledged. You have to be able to toot your own horn. But you have to be able to do it eloquently You have to do it in corporate speak. But you do have to bring some attention to yourself, as well as create a brag book for yourself. You know, like on my end, because I'm about revenue, every person, every wonderful letter that I got about how great I do, I keep that all, I document it all, and I share it with HR. You know, just if anybody had any questions about that. Also, when I come up with an idea, I say, oh yeah, that was my idea. I've had to say that because there was a couple of times where I came up with something and I didn't get credit. And you know, Peggy from 10 years ago might not have said it, but Peggy now said, oh, no, that was my idea. Remember?
That was me.
How much money it came in? That was my idea. Thank you. I wasn't, it took a while to do that. So I'm going to say it's a little of both. I mean, I hear you, girl. I hear you, Andrea, but I realized by keeping quiet, I got passed over and over and over. And, you know, so it's important to, yes, you know, as you make your cake, you know, but I'm up there in the beginning, like, this is my idea and this is how it worked. So you have to kind of straddle that.
I love that point though too, because a lot, you know, within the health system now and just amongst my friends, we've shifted our conversations from like having mentors to having sponsors. So for me at Northwell, you know, I've been very blessed to be able to have sponsors that are in very respectable positions. So even in those situations where like I'm sitting there like, hold up, that was my idea, I can look at them and they just know my body language. Or I'll get that text under the table like, that was you? All right, duly noted. And so they're able to advocate, you know, on my behalf in those rooms that I'm not yet, you know, at the table. And so you're right. It definitely is a combination of both. And you're my goals. I'm working up to that level.
I'm scared. Don't think that I'm not scared. I know I'm taking a chance, but
Yeah,
enough is enough. As Fannie Lou Hamer said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I'm just going to say it and, you know, and let you know how innovative I am and how valuable I am.
And I think that's critical. And we have to reframe the conversation so that we know it's okay to do that. And we have to be able to know the culture of our organizations and to be able to, sometimes you have to take space and sometimes you create space. And these days, I don't know if it's age or reality of what's going on with work, I'm in the taking space phase. Sometimes, more often than not though. But I do think that that balance is important for us to recognize how to negotiate between those two, you know, ideas.
Right. It's about taking that risk and being able to, you know, go out there and say, you know, your idea is good. You know, what you're bringing to the table is good, but it's being able to, you know, not be so humble. Because I think what happens is, you know, we tend to be humble in some of the things that we do because we're doing a good job. And the good job that we're doing is sometimes 10 times better than someone else. And you know, so we have to learn how to speak up to that. You know, Lisa, I just wanted to ask you a question in reference to academia. So at you know, on the college, higher education level, how are they working with diversity within the organization itself, with student enrollment and just being more inclusive within that environment?
So I must say, you know, where I work, we have a lot of work to do to engage that space a bit more intentionally. While we often speak to high retention rates, and the college does have a very high retention rate statistically,
Right.
but if we look at the retention rate of Black students and students of color, we're not doing that great. You know, and we have to understand, you know, what's connected to that. I've often heard from some of the students that Black students specifically, that they've made choices to transfer, particularly because they don't have the types of associations, fraternities, sororities, you know, on the campus, and they begin to realize the great networking opportunities and lifelong connections that they could have through some of those organizations. So I've heard that very specifically. I've also heard the college speak to the need to have more dialogue. And we've engaged, some audiences with students and student leadership with diversity dialogues to get people comfortable telling their stories, and being able to support them through some of those realities. And the students aren't the only ones with the stories. We all have stories. I was on a supportive type of meeting with some of our students and faculty and administrators of color earlier today, where we were trying to have presence with each other and support each other through that. So, specifically to your point, it is a targeted strategy with regard to recruitment. If it's connected to your mission, then you have to live it out, right? And you have to have the difficult conversations and be able to own when you don't do some of the things that you should do, as well as you may profess, through your positions and mission statements and things like that. So at some point, the rubber does have to meet the road. And I know my institution is at that point now. I know that other institutions, though, are doing phenomenal jobs with being intentional about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and they're really reaping great benefit from that.
All right, excellent, wonderful. Yeah, and this conversation is so good. So let's just buckle up a little bit longer, because we have questions flooding in the comment section. So I want to, go to some of those questions so we can have our esteemed guests to answer some of them. So I believe this is Alicia. She has two really great questions. The first one, and anybody can answer this: how do you deal with crabs in a barrel syndrome among your own people in the workplace? We want to take that.
I'm just going to start by saying it's just me.
Well, okay, so that's not true.
Continue.
That makes it easy, right?
Right.
I don't know. It's hard. You kind of respect the person for where they are, and you have to be strategic. When I encounter a crabs in a barrel person, I just circumvent them, because I'm not going to expend that much energy on that person. It's just wasteful. I can use it toward, just trying to get ahead. So I just try to be real flexible. I make sure that the work that I have to do, it doesn't rely on that one individual. I just make sure I have other options. So, and and I just try not to deal with that energy that they give off, because crabs in a barrel, they present themselves, who they are. And you say, oh, I got you.
Right. Even when they show up with their mask.
Exactly. You feel their energy.
As an ally, as a friend, because I have way too much experience with the crabs in a barrel when I was working in the public sector, working for the government, in the mental health field. So, ding, ding, ding. Let's even frame all of that. And it's tough. It's tough. It can be exhausting. I think Andrea used that word. It can be draining, because you can feel hurt by it, because you're like, hey, we're supposed to be on the same team here. However, part of this systemic racism that we're all talking about now, it creates that. It creates the environment for us to kind of cannibalize each other and to tear each other down. And sometimes you have those that are very strategic. Those, especially if it's a white colleague that may be even in a supervisory or some kind of leadership position, or they're your supervisor, whatever, where they can actually create the environment for you to pit one against each other. So you have to be mindful that these are all the factors that may be in there. And sometimes you just have some of us, and I'm talking about, us as Black and brown people, that because we're dealing with our own esteem issues, we're trying to climb the ladder, or we're trying to make sure we're not the target or being singled out, that we do use that whole crabs in a barrel because of, jealousy, envy, all of, fill in the blank. So the best thing that you can do, and I love what Peggy said, one, you just focus on you being the best that you can be, showing up as your best version, showing, and I think Andrea spoke about this, about showing your skill set and showing how, brilliant you are and all that you bring to the table. And I think the other piece of it is CYA. You got to document, because you can, when you're dealing with that, you may be dealing with, you know, some of the institutional racism and some of the discriminatory practices that can happen that can actually impact your ability to excel and grow and get promotions or whatever the case may be. But then you may have someone that looks like you that is also that's trying to sabotage your growth. So the best thing is to just make sure you're at your best, you're crossing your T's, dotting your I's, but you're taking care of yourself too. You know, I'm always going to go to the mental health aspect, but you're taking care of yourself and you're being aware and watching and observing who you have in your space and who's coming up alongside you. So anybody else want to add?
Definitely just agree to all of that. Absolutely.
I've experienced it too many times, so I know all about it. Thanks for that question, Alicia. The other question that she had, I thought was really strong as well, and anyone can jump out at this, is what about dealing with microaggressions and even aggressive aggressions in the workplace, especially in the current racially tense climate? Great question.
Great question. So I think even just people recognizing when microaggressions are being presented, sometimes they catch you off guard and you kind of like, wait, what? You know, and then you kind of have a reaction to it. Like, did that just happen? Was that just spoken? You know, did I just experience that? So it is critical for us to be able to educate ourselves on what they are, how they show up, and what we can do to feel like we're positioning ourselves to be responsive. So at the individual level, you know, do you have a relationship with the person where you can have a direct conversation and speak some of that truth about feeling that you are receiving their microaggressions? If not, do you have some like-minded people who can provide a support to you so that you can just, you know, share your narrative of what occurred and get some support around that while still trying to advocate for the systemic change that would allow for people to be aware of their implicit biases and you know, how they're interacting with that. But the aggressive aggressions, you know, that may be experienced as well, particularly now, I definitely say first, you know, deal with your own need for healing, you know, around these issues and acknowledge what's hurtful and acknowledge the pain. It's so important for companies and organizations to be able to acknowledge maybe we haven't gotten it right when it comes to some of these issues, but how do we create a space where we can learn together?
Yeah. I think one of the things for me, especially earlier this year, having experienced a very interesting situation at work that required HR involvement, but through that entire experience and having it be my first time ever needing to sit down with HR leadership because of who the individual was, you know, you have a right to be comfortable and to feel comfortable in your workspace, whether that's from a place of having a work conversation, whether it's having just, you know, general socialization amongst colleagues. And I think that, you know, when you find yourself in a position specifically where someone else's microaggression is making you uncomfortable, I think for me, being where I'm at in my career now, I ask questions. Somebody once, I heard them say in a panel event, to be respectfully curious, because I think sometimes people may think they're getting away with saying something, but then when you say, I'm sorry, what was that? Or did you just say, I'm not understanding? What do you mean by that? And putting that back on them, it kind of puts them in the position of being accountable to what they said. And if they're bold enough, whether or not they're going to repeat the same thing, or if they're going to try and clean it up. And I think for me, that's helped because it puts them in a space to know, okay, that's her boundary. I can't go there anymore with her. I can't cross that line again with her. And again, through that recent experience, I will make sure that HR earns their money if I feel uncomfortable in a situation and I do need to escalate something for them to intervene in.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that when you question them, if somebody challenges you and you say, so am I understanding that you said that? Especially when you're in mixed company, you know, I just want to understand, is that what you were saying? I need some clarity. The other thing is document. Have a mentor. If you can have somebody that you feel you can trust in the organization, or if not, someone outside. I've never had the benefit of having a sponsor, but I've always had someone, a sounding board, to say, this happened and I did that. Was that right? Or this happened, what should I do? And then of course, you know, taking advantage, you have those employee assistance programs where you can sign up to talk to a mental counselor, because you need to be able to kind of translate that and to make sure that you're not taking all this negative energy in and taking it in, because it's all about understanding where that aggression and micro or macro aggression is coming from. You know, that's all helpful. And to your point, keep HR knowing what their job is. You know, say, I feel uncomfortable. I don't know if I'm feeling right about that situation. You know, I just need some clarity. So any of those would work, because unfortunately, I've had to go through all of them.
I just want to add a couple of things, and we're kind of going into tips, and which is fine, because we need to know the solutions. We need to know how do we handle these situations, because they are serious, they can be dangerous, they can be detrimental to our livelihood. And I actually have a question. I want to have Dave chime in just from a technology standpoint, because it adds into. But I just wanted to mention that yes, be aware of the resources that you have within your company, your agency, because when I was an administrator, I've been on both sides. When I was an administrator, I've had to uh, be the mediator for staff that actually had a problem with each other, one white, one black. It turned into a workplace violence situation. And I had it to work through that from a supervisory standpoint, right? So one, whether you're a supervisor or you're just an employee or a staff, know the policies of your agency or your workplace. Know the policies, know the procedures, know the steps that you need to take. Educate yourself, especially in this climate, because people emotions are high right now. Things are very intense, especially those of you who are going to be going back into the workplace. Know your policies. Go right to HR or pull everything you can pull up now, on the internet, and on your intranet, depending on how your company is set up, and know them. Very important, especially if you work for a municipality or the government, because we know that's a whole nother culture that you you have to deal with and navigate through, because there's a lot of bureaucracy, right? And the second thing I want to mention is about employee assistance program, which I think Peggy mentioned. So I'm hearing a little bit of both, because I'm actually an EAP counselor. I was an EAP counselor for the government as well. And I dealt with a lot of issues, trainings and different things like that. But what I want to say about it, it is such an important tool and resource to use, to leverage, if you have it in your agency. If you don't, then advocate for there to be an EAP specialist on board. Okay, it's very important, because you need to have an objective voice that's going to be outside of, a supervisor or even the HR, because sometimes HRs are also compromised, right? Because people have relationships, right? There's a lot of nepotism in agencies. So we didn't even get on that. So these are just a couple of things that came to mind when I was listening to you guys. So I just wanted to mention them before I moved on to Dave. So Dave, I wanted to ask from a technological standpoint, because we keep hearing document. I said it, document, CYA, cover yourself. And I know you work with a lot of different companies as far as technology. I have a question. It may be an odd question, but it's just something that I know I've experienced in the past, and I don't know if this is the case. But when you are someone, say you're going through something where you're being harassed, there's some discrimination, and you want to send an email, and we know there's the CC and there's the blind CC, right? I just want to know, is there any way from a technology standpoint that you're able to communicate? Say you need to communicate with the higher ups and you don't want you're being harassed by your direct supervisor. Is there a way from a technology standpoint that you can be protected and safeguarded? And I think that's the question I want to know, using the technology. Unmute.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, there are different ways you can do it. emailing, the higher up is definitely an option. However, you still got to be cautious with it. Sometimes, if you could just perhaps just set an appointment, maybe to speak to that individual, that could be an option for a number of different reasons. For example, the person who does the network engineering, depends on the nature of the email you're sending. Network engineers, they have a way, they got to monitor the system frequently.
Okay.
So what we do, we set up certain scans to see what the emails entail. Maybe there was some type of friction perhaps between you and that network engineer. Maybe your email may not get to the higher up. So at times, to eliminate the nature and everything that surrounds that, it's best to go directly, or perhaps set up some type of appointment to speak to that higher up. There's so many different things that you could do in order to notify HR, but I think that direct communication is just it's so valuable. Instead of sending that email, because what happens too, there's something called phishing and social engineering. Phishing basically means someone can send an email on behalf of your name, but it's from a hacker, and they can send something that's totally different to the higher up. And when he opens it, it creates problems. So, nowadays with cybersecurity on the high, hackers are trying to do as much as possible to find any minute excuse to try to hack into a company's network. So that, some couple of things, just be cautious. If there's an issue, the best way is just, maybe making a phone call, trying to reach that individual. And as time progresses, perhaps you could send maybe an email or something just for further confirmation. But sending emails with that capacity and that nature, you got to be so cautious because of how the networks are functioning these days. Back then, it would have been no issues. That was the right protocol. But the way policies are set up nowadays, there's a little curve towards it, how things are being done.
Right, and that's what I wanted to confirm, because I thought I read that somewhere in an article, and I was like, oh my goodness. So, but unfortunately, because not everybody's structured the same way, like every agency, every company. So that's why sometimes if you need to get your point across, or you need to reach someone, they're not in the same building, or even sometimes in the same place, state. Email is usually the only way. But if it's a situation like this, to your point, it could be infiltrated. Someone else could be reading it. And I know that's happened to people. So that's why I brought it up. And I want those that are listening to be aware that this is an issue. So you have to be very careful, on how you handle and address these situations when they come up. All right, let me see. I think there was a couple of other questions, because we're a little over, but hang in there with us. It's such an important conversation. So Crystal said, why should I have to mask who I am just to get the job career field that I'm interested in? Ooh, anybody want to touch that one?
She's young. She's young.
I say outspoken with expectation.
Kids I need to be mentoring.
Well, yeah. Well, I think some people, and I understand her question. I actually know her. And she's young, but still, everything's come from a different perspective, right? But the younger generation are very much about, listen, I'm who I am. I'm not cutting my dreads. I'm not putting on a wig. I'm not changing the way I speak. I'm not changing the way I carry myself. Forget that, so there's definitely a generational difference about that. But I do want to, want y'all to chime in a little bit to kind of give some framework around it, give a different perspective so that they can still feel I can be me, right? I don't have to compromise my very essence of who I am. However, we do understand, I think we talked a little bit about code switching, that there are certain ways that we have to address and show up so that we can, make sure we are at the table, because we spoke about this yesterday, that we have a seat at the table.
It really depends on the industry. It really does. I think, first of all, what is it, millennials that are hiring now? So Crystal can be herself depending on what field it is. If we're talking financial services, well, baby, you're going to have to mask. But if it's other ones like media, anything that has to do with the internet, with the social media platforms, she could be herself. But when you're looking at the more traditional roles, engineer, accountant, banking, sorry, she's gonna have to mask to get in. That's
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Andrea.
I mean, I was going to say, in speaking as a millennial, I think it's so important to really recognize time and place. When you're with your friends and you're attending a concert, you're going to be one way versus when you will go out to a nice 5-star, restaurant to have a ladies' night, you're going to carry yourselves a little bit differently versus, when you're in Jamaica on vacation for your girls' trip. So I think it's just important to understand that, the same way we get to choose how we show up in different situations socially, it's no different than how we show up professionally. And don't look at it so much of having to, wear a mask or change or hide who you are, but look at it as yourself being very dynamic, and that you can, like you said before, you can play this game of chess and you can play it amongst different crowds and you can win at that game, and you still have your safe space to go back home and be your most authentic self. Because I know in D&I, and Peggy, I'm sure you have these conversations, we talk about, bringing your whole self to work. And I share this story all the time because someone in a leadership role at my organization always says, let's be honest, some of us don't need to bring our whole selves to the workplace. It's important that we leave those pieces, at home. So look at it as being dynamic. You get to choose how people experience you. You get to choose, how deep you let someone in, how vulnerable you are with that crowd, and allow that to, be the driver of how you show up, not necessarily the crowd placing the limitations on you.
And I just have to say, I love all of that. I mean, there's such an opportunity for your own personal and professional development when, even though we laughed earlier and said, oh, the person is young, it wasn't to be dismissive, but it was, we might have been thinking about our own experiences. I chuckled because I thought about my own experience when I was in college, had an internship. I think I was going into my junior year, summer internship at the New York Urban League, one of the Manhattan branch offices. And the executive director there, she was a sister. And I just looked at her like, oh, she got it together, and I was, first generation college student. I grew up in the projects in the Bronx. I went to an HBCU. And, she would tell me, okay, you got to do it this way and not that way. And a quick story, she told me one time, go to the store and get some refreshments for a board meeting. I said, well, what would you like? She said, cookies and juice. So around the corner was a bodega. My authentic self went to the bodega and got those 2 for $1 cookies and some juice. And then I didn't know what the board was, right, in the nonprofit sector. And then I went back and she said, oh, no, dear, this won't do. Where'd you go? I said, the bodega. Go up to Lenox Avenue and go get Pepperidge Farm entertainment, cookies. And I said, what? Well, I never had those cookies. What are you talking about? But it brought out a conversation. Who's the board? Why do they eat different cookies from me? And how do I better understand how I need to, kind of interact with some of that? So, Crystal and the Crystals out there that, kind of like, oh, I got to do this, take a learning experience from it, because when you see yourself on the other side, and you can kind of look back on that journey and speak to your growth and development and who spoke into you, it is a phenomenal learning experience. But we grow through it.
Oh, all right. So just before time, because we're going to go towards wrapping up, I do want to mention there are some of the comments in here. I see Edith chiming in. She said, thank you, Andrea. Kenny said, thank you for that, Andrea. Janelle, great insight. Edith said, Edith also says, face-to-face eliminates documented audit trail for your records. Right, based on what we was talking about, Dave, which is true. So spot on about speaking directly, making those appointments. But I know everybody, we want that trail, that documented trail is important, right? The paper trail we all talk about. See why? And let me see. Rhonda says every industry requires a mask. It depends on how thick or thin your mask has to be worn. So true. Lovely. I love that. I love that, Rhonda. Okay. Verdell, I'm gonna toss it back to you. I don't know if you had a final question, and then we're gonna go into wrapping up.
I just want to thank, everybody for being on the panel. I mean, this is really has been an insightful conversation. I think with the code switching and the mask and, being being the best you can be, how do you find solace in that? How are you able to care for yourself through having to, because it's exhausting. I mean, I've heard that word a couple of times. It's very exhausting being the teacher, having to teach individuals about who you are, and then taking on that burden of making sure that you're telling them the right thing because you don't want to get it wrong. So how do you navigate that, and how do you find some type of peace in being that person in most instances?
So for me, it's balance. When I introduced myself, I talked about my role at the college, but I also talked about my Association of Black Social Workers and being able to have that space with those organizations, or whether it's my sorority, or whether it's, other people who I connect with and relationships that I have where I feel they're like-minded. That provides balance and affirmation. So that has tremendous healing value for me. And I make sure that I use it as a healing strategy to keep myself fortified for this work, that can be a bit more taxing. I'm also a woman of faith, and so my faith, helps me in that regard, feeling that I'm called to serve, or that I'm positioned for such a time as this, and those kinds of things really help me. But I also know when I need to unburden and try to create those spaces so that I can do that.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say for me, when it comes to, feeling the heaviness of the day-to-day from a work standpoint, it's just knowing when to shift my expectations. I think that's sometimes where, that heavy load comes from, or that sense of disappointment, is because my expectations are one thing, but the reality of my circumstance in that moment is something completely different. I think personally, when it comes to balancing everything, I say this all the time. My tribe, aka my family, is phenomenal. I have blessed with a huge family. So I spend a lot of time, especially now that school is done for me, just really staying connected to my brother, my sister-in-law, my best friends who are my sisters, cousins, my sorors. And I think it's so important to really be able to have those trusted spaces where, whether you want to just vent about your personal emotions or feelings, or vent about what happened in your workday, you have those spaces where people just listen, and you're able to kind of get that out. I'm an advocate of therapy. I love my therapist. I tell her all the time she's my angel on earth. So I look forward to my bi-weekly time with her to really, vent things through, and then also allow the space for her to challenge my perspective on, what's been bothering me. So staying close to those who bring you joy, who listen, actively listen, and allow you to just simply be. I think it's so important, because when it comes to our work, to the point of masks, there's only but so much we can articulate from a frustration or disappointment standpoint.
And I guess, I definitely echo what my two incredible panelists have said. Oh, you too, Dave. I'm sorry, I forgot about you. But I think now I carry a strong sense of self, and I know I get and I guess I kind of pray every morning and meditate, and knowing that I am putting the best foot forward that I can possibly be. And I am confident with that. And that helps me, you know. I don't look at mistakes as mistakes. Oh God, I messed up. I look at it as a learning. So I look forward to challenges. And so even though something might be, the burden might be heavy, I'm looking at it as a challenge and a way for me to grow. Also, you know, my children, you know, also they give me that balance, you know. They kind of say, Mom, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. So then I go, oh, right. Tomorrow's a new day to try it all over again. And of course my family and you know, my sorority sisters, it's wonderful to have a network of people that you can talk to, like-minded people that you can share, because then they give you a perspective. While you might be your biggest critic, someone said, you just did something phenomenal. What are you talking about? So it level sets me. So I bring all that, you know, each day. And so it allows me to face it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need that tribe.
So yeah, just to add to that point, I think family is a great resource. It's a great way to to vent. But then too, you know, it's good to also have good mentors. Mentors are phenomenal because they can listen, and you know, they've been there, and so they can redirect maybe the process. Maybe there's something that you've been stuck with for quite some time. A mentor can sit down and really understand your point, your perspective. You know, exercising, you know, it's good getting some of that fresh air when stuff seems overwhelming. I think really helps. But above all, if you're very passionate and you love what you do, once you know you've done the best that you can from your heart, there's a minimum reason to feel extremely stressed out because you gave it your best. And people see transparency. People can see and sense when, you know, when you're doing something and you're giving it your all. So you know, in addition to every other comment that was mentioned, I think, you know, those were some good points, and you know, that's kind of what helps me get through, you know, some tough times.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. So just, you know, because we are running over and short on time, I just want to get a quick solution for working while Black in the midst of this global crisis and civil unrest. A solution that you have for, you know, for everyone that's watching.
Over it. You want someone to, you have to be yourself.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You have to, and not be afraid of it.
Right.
Be fearless. Be fearless with it. This is the time. Strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah.
Perfect opportunity.
I would say, you know, be a student of the game that you're in, you know, always be learning, always be in a place of discovery and never settling. You know, don't settle for no, don't settle for you can't. Just keep pushing, learn the language of the organization or the industry you're in, and use that as leverage to push forward.
Yeah, I would definitely say, you know your truth, but in that journey to get to a space where you are learning your truth, it can be a little awkward, daunting, you know, so find the supports that you need in order to deal with that point of discovery. And when you get to your truth, operate in it in boldness, you know, with courage. And that again helps balance and help you navigate some of these difficult times. But the journey toward truth and then operating it, critical.
Love it.
Yeah, and also, you know, just being yourself, and you know, take a moment to try to reinvent yourself as well. Be creative. A lot of companies, they want creative individuals, quick thinkers, people that are analytical. In addition to that, there's one great resource that I'm going to highlight later on, but it's called Verbal Advantage. And basically what it is, there's a quote by Mr. William Thud, and it basically says, a great vocabulary can open up doors that you never knew existed. So the book is designed to help us, with becoming more polished in our vocabulary. We could spend time doing such things to help us to stand out, to be able to have our information resonate well with whoever we're with. So those are just some of the things that we can do that can stand out. But being true to ourselves, and just finding opportunity and being adaptable is what would definitely help us get through these tough times.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. I mean, great conversation. So Phoenix, I'm going to toss it back to you for some final tips and thoughts.
Okay. First of all, I just want to thank you all for being here. This reason why it went over, because it's such a wealth. Look at these brilliant minds.
I mean, this is awesome.
Listen, we're gonna have to do a part 2. That's it.
Yeah,
we didn't even get to all of our questions. Okay.
Nope.
And I thank you all on Facebook that joined and added to the conversation, because let me just read some of these comments, because I just will feel remiss if I didn't mention some of the things. One, they're just giving a lot of kudos to all of you. So, again, just how wonderful you are. Edith says, say it, Lisa, outstanding sharing. Thank you. Reva said, I'm so happy. I happened to scan past this meeting on Facebook. Do you all meet often and when? I love to listen again. Sounds like a topic I needed to be a part of. I'm going through something. I heard the last 30 minutes. So then she asked about a replay, which there will be a replay. Thank you all for your transparency. It has left me feeling more secure in my skin in the workplace. And that's what this was all about. Blessings to you all. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for sharing that. Viva, for sharing your comments as well. And they're just saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to just give a few quick tips, and we've actually covered some of these, but if anybody's scribing, I will actually list this in the comments when we finish up. And also, I know Dave has a myriad of resources. All of you, if you have resources, we have our Facebook group, Community Cultivators group, that we can post this information. So you can do one or two things. If you're in the group, you can just share it there. And I invite all of you that are not a part of the Community Cultivators group to join it. And I will drop that link in the comments, or Verdell, maybe you could drop it there now so that people want to join. And we will either the panelists, you can email me and I will share it that way as well. Okay, but here are some of the tips that our community cultivator member, she's actually an HR consultant, Kim Fowler. She wasn't able to be here tonight, but she and I have actually done training, and we did a presentation for the Women Diversity Network last year called Women Under Siege. And this was all about workplace violence, or violence in the workplace, and how to address it. And she's a phenomenal HR consultant. She's a lawyer. So she sent some tips, and I'm going to share those now. And again, I'll drop them in the comments. But basically, she says, if you feel discriminated against or fear reprisal for expressing your opinions, you may familiarize yourself with your employers. What I spoke about, the employer's policies on mediating conflict and reporting. 2, document, which we have said many times here tonight. Stand up for yourself, which I heard that. Ask your network for help. I think Andrea mentioned that. Take care of yourself and get support to help you cope. Again, I mentioned that EAP, having a therapist, a counselor, someone to speak to. If you are a member of a union, the collective bargaining agreement governs how you seek to redress. So again, is knowing the policies and procedures. And definitely if it's a unionized situation, you need to, leverage that as well. And I think the last thing she says is, where internal policies and procedures do not remedy your concerns, you may seek to redress through the county or state commission on human rights. And complaints can be filed without a lawyer. Okay, so I will share this information in the comments as well as in our community cultivators group. Okay, Verdell, I didn't know if you wanted to share any tips that you may have had before we close.
Nope, I'm
Okay, we're good.
yep, yep.
This has been a lot. I thank you all for joining. I
It's
thank you
awesome.
all for the information. Thank you for hanging in there. But we will continue this conversations, other conversations like this. Our theme again is mask off. Hear us, see us, believe us. And we have 2 more virtual events next week, Sunday and Monday. And you don't want to miss it. So again, stay connected with us so you can tune in and be a part of the conversation. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed evening.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
night. Thank you again.